Welcome to Songs of Songs, my friends. Welcome back to another day. Welcome to Songs of Psalms, Psalm 95. We are on part 3, I believe. Part 3 of Psalm 95, and we're delighted to be back. Actually, no, it's part 2 of Psalm 95. I've been talking about it for 3 days, or 3 episodes, but we're really on part 2. We just started this psalm last week, and the last time we talked about it, we talked a little bit about Prince and how he wrote a song that lifted the mood of an entire generation. You know, I believe music and history, they go hand in hand, right? And it's so cool when you can learn a little bit of history from music. And so that's why we're studying the Psalms, because we're studying our own history, our relationship with the Father. How can we improve the relationship with our Father if we don't go back and study what the good book teaches us to understand and to know? And so this is a pretty good psalm, because this psalm is giving us a little bit of teaching of history and what the people of Israel, what they experienced with God, and what the psalmist wanted to convey in this psalm was an important instruction. And so we're gonna talk a little bit about that today, go into it a little bit more. But when we were talking about Prince, we talked about how he used a song to lift the entire mood of a generation. And just to recap it, he wrote 1999, the song called 1999, right? 1999, and he wrote that song in 1982. He wrote, I think that's 17 years, if I'm not mistaken. That might be 17 years. He wrote that in 1982. And, you know, it was a song that was ahead of its time. You know, I felt like that Prince stepped into the future to write an anthem that people were able to sing in 1982. And, you know, the reason why he wrote it was because he didn't like how everyone around him was so pessimistic, right? They were depressed, they were gloomy. There were things happening in the world at that time that were making them feel like the world was coming to an end. There was a cultural change that was happening in the United States at the time. You know, a lot was going on. A lot was happening in the early 1980s. And the U.S. was facing a turning point, right? In 1981, just a year before Prince wrote this song, Ronald Reagan became the president of the United States. He stepped into the White House. And Ronald Reagan was a Republican. He was an actor from California. And this man beat Jimmy Carter during the elections. And so, personally speaking, Ronald Reagan was my favorite president, even though I was very young at the time. But I've heard many, many great things about him and what he accomplished in such a short amount of time during his presidency. But when he came in and when he stepped into office, inflation was high. Where does that sound familiar? That sounds like today, right? Inflation was high. During the 1970s, the ending part of the 1970s, Jimmy Carter was the president. And the economy was just really, really poor. It was in a poor condition, right? Unemployment was really high. There were gasoline shortages, and gas lines would go for blocks and blocks because people were trying to get gas, right? They would wait hours online. Like, I've seen videos of how cars were just lined up. I don't think we've ever hit that point yet in our country, and I pray that we don't. But it was bad to see. You saw people sitting on lines waiting for hours just to get gasoline to fill up their cars, you know? So there was like this economic downturn that occurred in the late 1970s, and they were still recovering from that. And then to top it all off, the Soviet Union, aka Russia, right? They were a huge threat. They were a huge threat to us. I feel like we have those same issues today, right? Well, unemployment is a little bit more improved, but unemployment, just like then, was affecting people. A lot of people are getting laid off now. And we're seeing this issue with the pipeline, the oil pipeline, and how they're trying to force us to move into electronic cars. I won't get into specifics about that because we're not here to talk about that. But I'm just showing how history and music kind of come together. And so, Russia, or the Soviet Union, which is what they were called at the time, were a huge threat to us. They were threatening the United States with nuclear bombs. And, today we're still seeing them play a major role in our national security, right? Today we're seeing that they're still a threat to us. And not only are they a threat to us, joining the United States Enemies Club is China, is Iran, right? North Korea, and a bunch of other little nations that are kind of conspiring to come against the United States. So a lot of things that were happening in the 80s, in the late 1970s into the early 80s, it's the same issues plaguing us today. But back to Prince. When Prince wrote this song, he felt like the weight of the world was on his shoulders, and he didn't want to be surrounded by people that were so pessimistic, so negative. And so he wrote 1999. He wanted to point people to the future. And that's not easy to do. That's not easy to do when everybody around you is negative. When everybody around you is feeling like the world is going to end, feeling like, what's going to happen, when people are worried and afraid and anxious. And Prince used a song to be able to change the mindsets of people. And so, yeah, he was like, you know what, guys? Yeah, everything is what it is. Everything is what it is. But you know what? Let's not worry so much. Let's just party. Let's just party. So that is how he took and approached that time. He wrote a song about it. And so I believe that songs are super duper important because they can influence culture. He used one song to influence an entire culture, an entire generation. And so now here we are exploring Psalm 95. And we're looking at why the psalmist wrote it. We're looking at why the psalmist wrote this psalm. What message did they have for the people of their time? And what message do we need to embrace in our time? Because just like the 1980s, we're seeing the same old story. High inflation, unemployment. Oh, good morning, Debbie. Good morning, my beautiful sister. Thank you for joining. Debbie, we're talking about Psalm 95. Psalm 95. We're back into it. So just like Prince pointed people to look into the future with the song 1999, the psalmist of Psalm 95 wrote this song to point people back to God, because they saw how people were pulling away. And when times are tough and times are rough, you don't pull away from the Lord. You don't. You pull to the Lord. Yes, girl. Thank you for posting that. We want to pull closer to the Lord because He's the one that we need. Right? So the psalm starts with a call to action, a call to sing joyfully to the Lord, just like the song that Prince wrote, Party Like It's 1999. The Psalm 95 starts with a call to worship, to celebrate. And we talked a little bit about the beginning of this psalm. You can go back to my previous psalm and check it out. But they talked about, let's celebrate. Let's celebrate. And then they also talked about God being not just the great king and the great God, but being a great father. They're saying we are the sheep of His pasture. Verse 7 says, for He is our God, and we are the people of His pasture, the flock of His hand. right? So they're telling us, celebrate God. Come, let's bow down. Let's worship. Let us kneel before him. But he is our God. And we are the people of his pasture, reminding us that we need to go back and remember that he's our protector, he's our provider, he's our maker, that he cares over us, he watches over us. But then here comes the teaching part. Here comes the teaching part of verse 7. Look at what verse 7 says. Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your heart. And then it goes on, and I'll talk a little bit about that next part, but I want to focus on, good morning, my mommy's with us. Love you too, mama. God bless you. Thank you for joining. So the second part of verse 7 says, today, if only you would hear his voice. And today, you know, they say that today, right? It's like a recommendation that's for now. It's for now. It's not about if God asks you to do something tomorrow or next week or next month or next year. No, the psalmist says today. If God speaks to you today, don't delay, obey. That was a rhyme, y'all. Maybe I'll use that as a song lyric. Today, don't delay, obey. Don't delay, obey. So the key point for me here is, if only you would hear his voice. If only you would hear his voice. And to me, what that means is that the Father is always talking. The Father is always instructing, and he's always looking to communicate with us. If we just read above that we are the people, the sheep of his pasture, the flock of his hand. A shepherd, you know what? A shepherd, when the shepherd guides the sheep, they're talking to the sheep. And the Bible says that the sheep know the voice of a shepherd. They don't follow another voice. Sheep don't follow the voice of another shepherd because they've learned to hear the voice of the shepherd. When I went to Israel, there were moments when we saw like a shepherd walking sheep on the road. And it was amazing to see that. It was amazing to see how the sheep were in front and the shepherd stood behind, right? And he was leading the flock. Sometimes he was behind, sometimes he was in the front. But the sheep knew to hear the voice. They know the voice of the shepherd. And so the psalmist is saying here, today, if you would only hear his voice. If you would only hear his voice. It is reminding us that we need to be listening for his voice. When is his voice speaking? If you hear, yes, thank you, Debbie, for writing that in the notes. If you hear God today, obey. Don't delay. Thank you, girl. Finger snaps for you. But you know, sometimes I think that we are unwilling to hear him speak because we think he's going to make us or tell us to do something that we don't want to do. Right? Sometimes I think that sometimes we don't want to hear the voice of the Lord. I'm speaking for myself. Maybe none of y'all are like that. But I remember when I first came to the Lord and some missionaries would come to church, I kind of like tuned out because I felt like they were going to say, well, God wants you to go to Africa. And I was like, I don't want to go to Africa. Today, I would love to go to Africa. I would love to visit. But at that time, you know, I was very stubborn and hard-hearted. And I was like, I don't want to go to Africa. Or I thought that God was going to make me go somewhere or make me do something that I didn't want to do. And if you don't want to do it, it probably means that you need to do it. Like when God says, forgive that person, right? And you're like, I don't want to forgive that person. And you're like a child, I don't want to forgive that person. And God is like, forgive that person, right? Sometimes we don't want to do certain things. And God will tell us certain things that are for our benefit and for just to make us whole. So I know I'm running out of time here. I need to wrap this up, but I wanted to bring this point, and maybe we'll keep talking about it again when we meet. But today is an action word for now. For now. Today, if you hear his voice, today is about today, right? Today is about today. Jesus told us in Matthew 6:34, Jesus told us, listen, he basically said, don't worry about tomorrow, right? He was telling us to focus on today. He said, therefore, don't worry about tomorrow, because tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Every day there's a problem of its own. So Jesus was like, I want y'all to keep your focus on today. What am I asking you to do today? I want you to live for today. Focus on my voice today. Know that I will speak to you today. Know that I will instruct you today. Right? Today, if you will only hear his voice. So I think this is a reminder for us that we need to every single day focus on the day that's at hand. What is God saying today? What instruction do we need to follow today? Right? Because his instructions are for our good. They're never for harm. They're never to cause us heartache. His instruction is for our good. He knows what's best for us. So we need to be listening for his voice today, knowing that he's going to speak. That's what the psalmists were trying to get to us, that he's going to speak to us. He's always speaking. So if he's always speaking, guess what we need to be doing? Always listening. Always listening. I recall a few years ago, right? A couple of years ago, maybe not more than 4 or 5 years ago, I was driving to Albany, New York, right? For me, it's about a 4-hour drive. And, you know, anybody that knows, I love to drive. I love to just go places. I can just get in the car and go, especially if it's a beautiful sunny day. Now, if it's a rainy day, I'm staying home, y'all. I ain't going nowhere. But on a beautiful sunny day, and if I'm not doing anything, which is very rare, I will go for a drive. And so I remember I was driving to Albany. I was going to an event. And as I was driving, I was listening to music and just enjoying the ride. And if you've ever driven the New York State Thruway, it's beautiful because it's like mountains on your left, mountains on your right. And it's just a beautiful scenic drive. And when I drove that day, it was in the fall, so you know, the fall tree colors, and I was like getting distracted because it was just so spectacular how beautiful the colors of the tree were. And now here I am driving, minding my own business, just listening to music and enjoying this scenic ride. And I was just at complete peace. But then there came a moment, and this was so interesting. There came a moment when I heard in my spirit, I was probably driving like this or maybe like this with just one hand on the wheel. And I heard in my spirit, put both hands on the wheel. And I was like, what? Like, is that you, Lord? Like, it was so strange to hear, right? Put both hands on the wheel. So I was just like, okay. So then I put both hands on the wheel and I was just driving. And don't you know that like 2 or 3 minutes later, this wind, this incredible force of wind just swept the highway. It came either from east to west or from west to east. I don't know where it came from. It just was this incredible wind that just came like out of nowhere, because it's an open field. It's an open, like, there's no buildings, there were no, there were some trees, but you didn't even see trees moving. It wasn't windy that day. It was just like a calm, beautiful day, and this wind came out of nowhere. It was unexpected, and it shook my car, right? As I'm driving, it shook my car. And had I been driving with just one hand on the wheel, and that wind came, I would have lost control of my car. But because I had both hands on the wheel, I was able to react quickly, and I kept and maintained my control. So just like that, his small, still voice kept me safe. It kept me safe. Had I not obeyed that small, still voice and been like, put both hands on the wheel, who knows? Who knows what could have happened? So today, my friends, if you hear his voice, don't delay, obey. I don't care what it is, how small or insignificant you hear something in your spirit, whatever it is, listen to it. Thank you, Debbie. Debbie says you heard his voice. Maybe someone is going to offend you, right? Maybe someone is going to offend you, or maybe someone's going to do something that's going to hurt you, right? Or someone is going to say something that's going to, just make you feel a certain kind of way. You might hear the voice of the Lord that says, don't say anything. Maybe a family member, or maybe a friend, or a colleague. You might hear his voice say, don't say anything. Or you may hear him say, just forgive, just let it go. Just let it go. Just keep your mouth shut. Don't talk back. Don't insult. Don't come back at them. Right? Just leave it alone. Leave it alone. Because he's going to tell us to do what is right. It may not be what is easiest for us, but he's going to tell us to do what is right. Why? Because what is right is going to help us just keep peace. Be at peace. But if we listen to our flesh is going to cause us to do something that's wrong. Our flesh is going to cause us to be in anger. And anger never leads us to the right places. Okay? So today, if you hear his voice, obey. That's it. He's going to speak, and it's going to be a small, still voice, quiet voice. Just obey. Just listen to it. You'll be all right. All right. Let's get out of here, my friends. Okay? I hope that encourages you to it's going to encourage me, right? to do the same thing, because people aggravate us during the day, and we just got to know when to just not give in. All right, let me bless you as we get out of here. We'll be back here again tomorrow, God willing, for the continuation of this psalm. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance toward you and give you shalom. God bless you. Ciao, ciao. Have a great and amazing day. Thank you for joining. Ciao.